During the Bronze Age, the height of Western civilization, Egypt believed in gods with animal heads. Anubis, Horus, Thoth, Ra are among them. In this culture, people believed that the pharaoh was a god that would join the Egyptian gods in the afterlife in the underworld. For around 2,000 years, people believed these gods to be true. During the Iron Age in antiquity, pantheons of human gods were the norm. The Greeks had their gods Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, Hades, Hermes, Ares, Aphrodite, etc. They were all said to live on Mount Olympus, and in the mythology, humans were created from mud by Prometheus, a titan who sided with the Olympians. And Zeus dictated that humans were to be subservient to the gods and had to be moral. These gods were very human-like in their behaviors. The Romans would project the lore of these gods onto their own gods, giving Jupiter the lore of Zeus, Juno the lore of Hera, etc. Some of their own gods, like Janus, whom had no Greek equivalent, were added to the pantheon of gods. The barbarians to the north had their own gods, like Thor, Odin, Freya, Tyr, etc. in Norse, or in Anglo-Saxon, Thunor, Woden, Frigga, and Tiw. But during the early Middle Ages, a new religion, Christianity, would replace paganism. The question I intend to answer is, why did Christianity replace paganism, and how did it help kingdoms grow more powerful? The Old Testament was written around 600 to 500 BC. People believed in a fertility god named Baal and a few others, but the ultimate goal of the leaders was to create one god. Thus, the commandment being worded, "Thou shalt have no gods before me," a wording that says other gods are okay, but they are secondary to him. Each book had its own objective. Genesis had the creation story and included lore regarding the fertile area where the Persian Gulf is today, that would later be flooded as the Ice Age ended. This happened 5,500 years earlier and appeared in all Middle Eastern religions. The story of Eden is the lessons of obedience and the dangers of knowledge. Eating from the tree of knowledge is wrong. In that era, the snake was a symbol of wisdom, like the owl is today. The Tower of Babel is included because there needed to be a reason why Israeli kings didn't build monuments to religion like pharaohs did. Egypt had the security of its location and food productivity to allow the surplus of labor to do such tasks, and Israel can afford to do such efforts. Based on their geography, it would be a religion that didn't require monuments, arts, idols, etc. The second book, Exodus, is about a time when Egypt used to control Levant and the fall of Middle Kingdom Egypt. The Hebrews didn't live in mainland Egypt, but rather the Egyptian Empire controlled the lands of the Hebrews in the past. Egypt was required to be made into villains so that an Israeli identity could be made, and Egyptian religion and ideas could be pushed out of the culture. Middle Kingdom Egypt fell after the Thera eruptions on the island to the north of Egypt, that erupted 2 times within 2 years and was the biggest eruption of civilized history. The first eruption disrupted the climate and caused an algae bloom in the Nile, making the river red. This caused the frogs to go inland, and many of them died en masse in the streets and such. The loss of many frogs allowed many fly populations to explode, and many diseases got spread around. Then the second eruption happened, and it caused the sky to rain a ash, and then it blackened the skies, and later the disruption caused a plague of locusts. Eventually, superstitious people sacrificed their firstborn livestock and sons to appease the gods. And then it was over, coincidentally. Leviticus had a lot of rules regarding what you can eat and what sexual acts you are allowed to do. A common theme throughout was that people should follow God's chosen one, and failing to do so will result in bad things happening. So why did Christianity get adopted in the Middle Ages? When Rome fell, a bunch of barbarian kingdoms were established. The Vandals, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, the Lombards, the Franks, the Anglo-Saxons, the Burgundians, all got new kingdoms in the lands that Rome once controlled. With so much chaos going on and no centralization, society developed differently. We ended up in a feudal system, in which the peasants depended on a lord for protection. while the Lord served the monarchs for greater protection. In this time frame, raids happened all the time, whether it be other barbarians, Vikings, or whomever, and you needed to raise an army to fight back. So to have a kingdom that can defend itself, you have to have citizens who can serve the kingdom. In comes Christianity. First, people are promised immortality in an afterlife for their obedience. So they will fight wars for you, and death isn't a big deal because you just go to heaven. Paganism didn't offer the same deal in regards to afterlife, so people converted. The Catholic Church was the organization that handled all this, making the monarch subservient to the Pope. Pagan temples were converted into churches. Pagan traditions were turned into Christian holidays. Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, and even at one point, Halloween. The theme of obedience and always following the leader, even when things are questionable, is what helped make a disciplined army stay in formation when battling the enemy. The idea is that the monarchs are leaders because God willed it, just as He willed His leadership to Abraham, Moses, King David, and Solomon, and many other figures in the Bible. Everyone in the story who followed God's chosen one were rewarded, and those who didn't were punished. David beat Goliath because God willed it, because a smaller army should stand strong. God punished the Hebrews who were not courageous enough to take the land of Canaan, and made them wait a generation before they could get it, and the cowards of the story found death in the wilderness. And then there is the issue of soldiers and manpower. People needed to reproduce as effectively as possible. Family structure needed to be tight. In the pagan days, adultery was very common, so kids are often raised by their uncles or their grandfathers. This is because if your sister had a kid or your daughter has a kid, it's your blood. But if your wife has a kid, you don't know if it's yours. One of the 10 Commandments says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And there are also 3 commandments about coveting your neighbor's wife, wealth, and house. With God always watching and the threat of hell, adultery happened less often and was more severely punished. So the family structure could be maintained and kids can be raised by 2 parents. In addition, there are the Leviticus rules about sex, ensuring you focus entirely on procreation. Kingdoms that adopted the Catholic Church had superior armies. Under Charlemagne, who pushed Catholicism and literacy, Europe grew. Charlemagne began building things that we call castles to defend his kingdom from invaders, and stability would come to Europe. The French Normans would invade England 200 years later with the blessing of the Catholic Church. After the conquest, William the Conqueror would build castles and churches, and the wild era of Vikings and barbarian raiders would be over, as the High Middle Ages would begin. But not everything of the past would be lost. Pagan holidays are celebrated today as Christian holidays, and the 7 days of the week are named after the 7 celestial bodies: Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. But the Anglo-Saxons didn't believe in the Roman gods. They had their own gods, so while Sunday, Moon Day, and Saturn Day mostly remained the same, the remaining 4 were named Tuesday, Woden's Day, Thor's Day, and Frigga's Day. But in the end, Christian Europe would rise above the rest of the world. The constant competition between European nations due to the geography fostered the spread of a very strict religion that made many obedient soldiers. Soldiers that would go on crusades and bring home spices and silk. Soldiers that would reconquer the Iberian Peninsula and the Italian Peninsula from the Muslims. Soldiers that would build the kingdoms of Spain, France, Britain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, whom would all compete for the rest of the world's resources and turn us into the globalized world that we live in today. Today, some of us are still believers, while others are not. Many are just spiritual. Our founding fathers were a product of the Enlightenment, and most were deists, willing to try new ideas that could not be tried in Europe. The world of education has shown us the big picture. and the phase we went through in the Middle Ages and much of the modern era may be coming to a close. Just as how the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods are relics of the past, it's a brave new world now, and we are adjusting to life in a new phase, where we go to space, celebrate superheroes and other modern Marvel characters, but you don't know where you are going if you don't know where you've been.